Well, while we're waiting for that, Reed, I see you're on the call. You had, I think, put something into the chat last time about like an intern sharing program or something that you maybe wanted to circle back to.
So what was it, James? Sorry, repeat it.
You had sent me some information about a program that was paying like partial wages for interns to get them placed.
I can't remember off the top of my head. I
the program the state's doing was the program the state's doing about high school students, putting them in the workflow. Reed, you and I had both independently seen it on MUR that morning.
Oh, that's right. I'd have to find it again, James.
Okay.
I sent it to a couple of our manufacturing businesses already. As like, because I know everybody's struggling with workforce development stuff.
Right.
So I'll see if I can find it again, James, and I'll put it back in the chat so everybody can grab that link too. Did you send it out at all?
I probably did not, because I think I was scrambling to get away for vacation. But I can. It may have made it into the notes for last week. I can go and check, and if it didn't, I'll either forward what you send me or go back to what you put in the chat last time.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, it would just be a nice resource for everybody to have, so that, you know, they can send it out to their manufacturing companies as well. Hold on, let me see if I can find it.
Anybody else have anything you want to touch on while we're still in some time?
Yeah. I have an odd one.
Yes.
Oh, wait, go ahead. Sorry, Joe.
Oh, all right, Darren. I might be quick. I'm not sure. There's a nursing home proposal coming up that sounded quite large, $170 million, and there's a Zoom on it tomorrow. And I wonder if that's a big economic development, I think, piece in the county. So I just wanted to mention it and see if there's anything else to be said about it.
That's Chris, right? Dover?
Yeah, so that is Stratford County needs to replace a Riverside rest home. And so what they're looking at doing is using a bunch of funding sources to put together this new state-of-the-art facility that it will have a lot more aim towards Alzheimer's, which is what they see 90% of the current facility occupants as. So they're gonna redo it or build a new facility on the site. And then they're looking to partner with Crossroads House out of Portsmouth to take over Riverside as a sheltering facility to address some of the need here in Stratford County for sheltering, both temporary and long-term.
Can they, is it $170 million of new construction? And can they possibly put the new construction away further from the prison? Seems like a unusual pairing. I know it, many people here are probably used to it, but it's an unusual pairing, it seems. And maybe Crossroads is a good buffer in between or something, but
so
I don't know how much land the county owns.
If you're familiar with the complex, on one side of it's sort of like a three-pronged area. One side has the administrative building with the courthouse, one has the Hyder House, which is a hospice, and then one has the Riverside as well as the prison, and which I'm sure they call a correctional facility. And then behind Hyder House is where they're looking to build this new facility, which unfortunately is probably a better tie-in, but that's what they're looking at doing. And then rehabbing Riverside. So instead of having long-term care next to the correctional facility, they'll have sheltering, which is also near some of their support services that they've got in place and have had in place. There, some of the social service agencies that are there.
And sorry to, just to ask one more, does that mean the new facility won't be on that same corner of that intersection? Is there like new land across the street, or is it connected to the same site as the prison?
So it's all considered one complex, and behind the, oh, Tori's on here. She knows this better than anyone. The Hyder House piece has some significant land behind it, all on the same property that the county owns. If you turn from County Farm Road to County Farm Cross Road, at the intersection sort of in front to the right, as you're facing the intersection, you would see Hyder House. When you turn right onto County Farm Cross Road, just beyond it, there's a field area, and that's where they would build the new facility.
Perfect. Nice.
We're also working with them on an idea of doing some solar power to help provide the electricity for all of their facilities as part of that.
Very nice.
That's 170 acres, right?
Sounds about right. The total complex is pretty
No, the
large.
solar piece, 170 acres. That's what I thought I read.
Wow.
Yeah, but that, and that's something that the commissioners and I need to verify a little more. They're not deducting floodplain and some other features that I think, I'm not a solar expert, but by far it seems to me you have some limitations with floodplain and steep slope with solar, so they need to take that into account. We're working with them because the city has some adjacent land that we're looking to do a combined offering for utility level solar between the county land and the city's property. Because I figure it's 3 miles to the closest distribution line. So we need to make it large enough that there is economy of scale to carry that 3 miles to get to make the cost benefit work.
Is there water and sewer up there?
There is. The county put in a pump station for the sewer
Right.
a few decades ago. And then there is water that loops around through there back to 6th Street.
Right.
Hey, Chris, on this, I'm glad you asked the question, Joe. I was curious too, and read it in the paper this morning. Chris, kind of on the same subject matter, what's going on with the Taekwondo studio between the 3 communities this winter? Do you have a plan yet, or do you know what's going on?
You mean the Willand temporary shelter?
Mm-hmm.
So Somersworth reached out to Dover and Rochester and said, we want to keep it open. And so first, the Somersworth Council voted to return to a temporary emergency shelter status as opposed to the more ongoing facility that was operated last year. And then Dover and Rochester both agreed to that. I believe that Rochester is going to be providing some additional funding. Dover is continuing to provide the building and the maintenance for the building, and then Somersworth's contribution is recognizing the tax loss of having commercial property off the tax roll in a desirable commercial area.
Yeah. So Chris, part of, I guess, the reason why I'm asking, I've had a couple of people interested in exploring buying it, and I've sent them to you. I never followed up with you to see if they actually contacted you, but if I do have someone interested in purchasing, should I still send them to you?
Yeah, certainly. Two that I've spoken to previously, I've acknowledged that it's a policy decision regarding whether we keep and maintain it or sell it, and that long-term the city of Dover has no interest in owning it.
Yeah.
So once the sheltering provisions are no longer needed, we will seek to dispose of it. My understanding from what was proposed by Mayor Hilliard and endorsed by the 3 councils was we will remain in effect until the county option at Riverside becomes available. So the status quo might be, in my mind, I can't imagine it's not 3 to 5 years, just thinking you got to build a new rest home, which is at least an 18-month build. And then you have to transition over and rehab the existing building, which is going to be another 18 months to 2 years. So I suspect I'll have to budget how to put a new roof on that place by the time we get rid of it.
So can I jump in? This is a good conversation and an important topic, but Clayton Domains from Placer has joined the call. So in the interest of keeping up with his schedule and getting him in on the call before 10, can we transition and come back? Okay, so Clayton, I can hand things over to you.
Yeah, fantastic. I appreciate it, James, and nice to meet you all. As James mentioned, my name is Clayton Demanis. I'm on the sales team over here at Placer. So yeah, I'm going to run you through a quick overview of Placer.ai. Give you all a sense for what we're doing. I know that Reed, I see you on the call. So yeah, Reed and I have met before, so it'll be a bit of a review for her. But yeah, happy to be talking with the rest of you here. So let me start sharing my screen and I'll start telling you more about us. All right, so assuming you all can see my screen okay now, to give you a bit of background into Placer.ai, the who we are, what we do, how we do what we do. And then I'll run through just a short demonstration for you all, just so you can get a visual for what we're actually doing here. So what we are considered here at Placer is a location analytics platform. Essentially meaning we're powered by mobile location data, people's cell phones, in other words, to provide what we call market intelligence on any physical space in the US. So what we do is we harness the data from millions of mobile devices, about 32 million to be exact, meaning about 1 out of every 10 people or so is a member of our panel. So if we just take a look at this call, about 2 to 3 of us are likely Placer panel members. So as we aggregate the location data from those 32 million devices, we then provide, like I said, market intelligence on any physical space you're interested in learning about. That could be somewhere small and finite as dropping what we call a traffic pin on any road, street, or highway. And we can give you more information on how many people pass by a location, where they're coming from, where they're going to. But there's a lot of other great information you can glean from that as well. And for much larger points of interest, we can look at anything from like a downtown area, a neighborhood, a shopping center, even an entire city. And give you more information not only on visitor behavior, resident behavior, but also employee behavior. We can tell you where visitors to a location live, where they work, where else they go. So a lot of information in here, again, that you can call upon for any location. And we've done a lot of work in what we call the civic space here at Placer. These are different cities, counties, economic development organizations, destination marketing organizations all across the country, utilizing our data. We now have over 300 clients in the space utilizing our data for a number of different purposes. Some of these may stand out to you all on the call more than others, but this is just meant to give a general overview of all the various use cases that our data is used for, from things like economic development, not just retail economic development, but also manufacturing, office, industrial. There's use cases for all of it. We can do tax estimations from sales tax to bed tax. There's a lot of information in our portal that can be used to support local businesses, give them much more insight into their business that they would very likely never get otherwise. Our tool is used as a great way to measure COVID recovery, not just foot traffic to various retail locations or various districts like a downtown, but also things like return to work. Are we seeing more people return to the various workplaces that we have in our communities, and what does that look like? So I'm not going to go through all these use cases that are on this slide deck. I'll send them to somebody on the call here, and then I'll have it shared out. But this has about 12 different use cases of how real customers of ours have utilized our data for a number of different purposes. So like I said, I think this is a great resource to kind of get an overview of how other customers of ours tend to utilize it. But because we do just have a short amount of time here, I'd rather give you all a visual instead of going through each one of those and show you around Placer a bit. So I'll ask for somebody, a volunteer on the call to give me a location that would be interesting to take a look at. I zoomed in on Rochester, but we can go anywhere you want. But is there anywhere in particular like
Exeter.
Oh, what's that? I'm sorry.
Exeter.
Okay. Do you see that on the screen right now? Sorry.
No,
Okay.
sorry, you can do Rochester. I'm kind of messing with these guys.
Oh, no.
Darren's from Exeter.
No, I mean, okay, gotcha. And yeah, I'm not familiar where that is, but yeah, I mean, I'll
south.
go anywhere y'all want. So, what works best?
Anything works, man. Rochester's fine.
Okay. Anybody have an opinion on somewhere in
Do the
Rochester? Or
Ridge.
do you just want me to pick somewhere at random?
How about the Ridge?
The
I
Ridge.
was gonna say the Ridge too.
Beautiful. All right, looks like we got it. So beautiful. So as you guys can see here, we not only have the entire center geofence in here, but you also have individual retailers that within that center that you can pull up as well. So I'm going to go ahead and open the report up here for the Ridge. While that pulls up, a couple other things to highlight here is you don't have to go through necessarily that whole song and dance every time you want to look up a spot. There is a place in the area called My Zone where you can very easily group up your different your different types of points of interest and pull them up very easily. So if you wanted to pull up your various shopping centers, let's say as an example, you can do that very easily, pull it up as a single report, where you don't have to necessarily do the whole Google search or whatever it might be every time. Pardon my cough, guys. But one thing to note for any point of interest within the Placer platform here, you'll be able to get historic data going back to January 1st of 2017. That's the beginning in time, so to speak, with our product. So one of the great things about it is that gives you about 3 years and a couple of months of data that predate March of 2020, aka when COVID came along. So you can really benchmark what did foot traffic look like in a given area prior to the pandemic, and then how have things looked like since then? Because our data also is as recent as typically a 3-day trailing lag. So in this case, just this last Saturday, August 20th is the most recent day of data that we have in here. So about as real time as it gets in terms of getting this type of visibility. Another thing to note here is that there are different types of audiences that you can sort by. Visitors, employees, and residents. Each one have their own use cases depending on what it is you're looking to learn. When we're looking at visitors, that's typically what we look at for various like retail areas, a downtown, whatever that might be, where we're looking at, okay, who's coming to visit this location? Where do they come from? How much time do they spend here? Where else do they go? So that's typically what we're looking at for visitors. Also for tourism, it's a nice metric to look at. Employees, this would be used if you wanted to just isolate the Ridge, or you can look at the entire city of Rochester, sort by employees and see anybody who comes to work either in a particular area like the Ridge or the entire city. So you can see how local your workforce base is. Do we draw in people from outside of the city or the region to come work here? If so, what type of worker are they? Education level, work type, all that type of stuff. So employees is one for that. And then residents, pretty self-explanatory. That would be evaluating the resident population of any given area. I've seen this used for a number of different things, from things like retail leakage, or even healthcare leakage. I had a customer sign up just yesterday, pretty much purely based on analyzing where people are going for healthcare. But yeah, when we're looking at residents, we can see where do they go, whether it be to shop, to go to events, whatever it might be. This is used also for things like food deserts to see, okay, if this area feels underserved, maybe for food, for grocery, we can see where do they go, people in this area for grocery. So a number of different use cases just by sorting out by these different types of audiences here. Now, looking at the report that we have pulled up for the Ridge here, I went ahead and ran this one for the entire length of time, going all the way back to 2017 through Saturday for this report here. So everything starts in a Placer report here with these panel visits that we see right here. What that's highlighting is anytime we saw a member of our panel, one of those 32 million people I referenced in my introduction, if they step foot inside of the ridge and if they stayed for at least 7 minutes, they get captured as a visit. So you can see over the last 5+ years, we've captured about 425,000 visits by members of our panel to the ridge. Now, once we captured that data, which is what we know to be true based on visitation from our panel, there's an algorithm that goes into to provide the visitation estimates you see over here. So visitors are the number of unique individual people we estimate have been to the ridge at some time over the last 5.5 years. So we estimate about 481,000 unique people. Those 481,000 people visited on average about 48 times over about a 5.5-year time frame. So just about 4 to 5 times a year, or I'm sorry, about 10 times a year is what I should say, in terms of average visitation. So then we see total visitation up here, about 23.5 million total visits to the ridge over a 5.5-year time frame. Or if we want to look at the last 12 months, you can see what those numbers look like here. Any questions at all for me, guys, on how we arrive at these numbers? This is usually where some questions come into play in terms of how we get here. So just want to make sure before we move on.
Clayton, thank you. Tori Jennison with Stratford County. I have a quick question about the demographic information. Where does your demographic information come from for your panel?
Great question, Tori, because we actually don't collect any what's considered personally identifiable information on any of those 32 million people who are members of our panel. We only collect the location data from your device. But because we see where your device is at all times, that's part of the requirement to be a member of our panel, is that we get 24/7 visibility into where that device is. So based on what's called the dwell time behavior of the device, we can then determine where you live and where you work, are the first two things we determine. So we see, where does Tori's device go 7 days a week and spend most of its time? That's very likely your home location, versus where you go to the office would be your work location. So from there, we basically map out, which you'll see the demographic data we have in a minute. We're skipping ahead a little bit, but to help drive this point home.
I think adding to that question, how a panel is chosen?
Great question. So it's we don't necessarily choose them per se, but what we do is we partner with about 500 mobile applications that run a piece of our code in the background. They're all different types of apps. Most of them are under an NDA. One of them that is not is something like Life360, is one of our biggest app partnerships. So we actually have exclusivity with Life360 as a matter of fact. So so step one is you download one of those apps that we're partnered with. And then step two is that you opt into always on location data with those apps. A lot of those apps that we partner with, like Life360, for example, pretty much require you to have your location services on at all times. So it's usually a mutually beneficial type thing there.
So in other words, people don't know if they're part of the panel. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there's not like something that comes up when you download one of those apps and you opt in to location services says like, congratulations, you're a member of Placer's panel. No, it does. But you would probably heard of us by now, but
they're free to turn off their location services at any time.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, but then again, like I said, for Life360, just using that as an example, if you turn off the location services, you basically disable their whole service. The whole point of that thing is that they know where you are. So if something happens, like you fall, something like that, they can get an ambulance to. So yeah, a lot of those partnerships that we have, it's beneficial for the user to have location services on. Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, Clayton, on back on the ridge. So that's like a whole, kind of shopping mall with a lot of different businesses. Can you zoom in a little bit more on some of the data for specific businesses within the Ridge District? Can you get to it from where you were, or do you have to kind of go back to the main search function?
I mean, you just go back to the main search function, but I mean, it's fairly simple to do. I mean, you would just go back here and say, okay, I want to look at Hobby Lobby, or actually, Noah, now that you mention it, we actually just put a little bit of enhancement into into the platform where we have this tenants overview section here, which shows all the various tenants within that center. So thank you for reminding me. Actually, you can just right within the platform as of about a month ago, open up a report for just that single tenant. So
Very cool. Thank you.
So if there's no other questions, a couple things to highlight here. Visits trends is a pretty self-explanatory one, but this is looking at weekly visitation to the Ridge. So like I said, I love pulling the data back to 2017 and doing this whole time frame, because we can see how did things look like back in 2017, 18, 19. In 2020, you can see when that what we call the COVID dip occurs, where people just stop visiting for a short period of time. Usually the recovery is very dependent on what type of tenants you have in that center, which things like Walmart anchor tenants, grocery, home improvement, the recovery was pretty quick for the most part for a lot of these. But then we can see here throughout 2020, 2021, 2022, that everything's really trending up and to the right. Foot traffic is up at the Ridge as compared to pre-pandemic. So great news there that the pandemic really hasn't affected it in too much of a negative way. From there, we can look at tenants overview, which gives you a really good barometer for how well tenants are performing within a center. This is used for a couple of different purposes in economic development. For retail recruitment, especially if you have strong performers in your centers, like let's take this Marshall's as an example. Your paper store is pretty successful as well. Excuse me. Which what you're looking at here, guys, by the way, I'll explain this really quick, is how any of these tenants are doing versus others in their chain at either the nationwide or the state level. So in this case, we're comparing Walmarts to all other Walmarts across the country or just in the state of New Hampshire here. So if you have very strong performers here, you can use that as a tool to say, hey, if you open up your doors in the county, in the city, wherever we're trying to pitch, you're going to have a successful location. Look at all these other stores that are having some of their more successful locations in the country or the state of New Hampshire when they open up their doors in Rochester here. But on the other hand, if you look at it on a bit more of the cynical side, this can also be used as a tool to predict things like retail flight, where if you don't have very strong performers, I mean, most of these are pretty okay, but let's just take this Petco as an example here. Not one of their stronger performing stores, either across the country or in the state. This is used very often to predict, hey, we might see one of these retailers close up shop and leave town because they're not having one of their stronger locations here. I just talked to a city in Illinois just a couple of weeks ago where when I got to this part, the guy said, I wish I saw this a couple of months ago, because one of the tenants we were showing had just recently closed, and he was like, yeah, this was dead on. They closed because their store wasn't very successful. Very good tool to measure just how well retailers are doing.
So a few questions on that. So I guess for things that aren't chains, it would be like Eastern Paradise. It just shows you the foot traffic, but none of the other columns. Is there, I guess, anything that gets into more detail of like customers that might be interested in going to an Asian restaurant, for example, or are there ways that we could use this predictively, that, you know, all right, we've got a Walmart and a Market Basket in there. Could we like figure out what a Hannaford's might look like if we were to drop it in here and get some sort of an estimate on those chain rankings?
Yes, in terms of an estimate on a chain ranking, not really, just because it's difficult for us to predict how well someone's going to do. We can tell you what their average foot traffic is for a store in towns of your size or in the Northeast or whatever it might be. But yeah, to predict where they're going to rank, we don't quite do that. To get to your other point though, James, yes, absolutely. Well, I'll show you in just one second here how we have what we call sociographic data. and here that gets more into people's likes and what they like to do in their free time. So we could show you, yes, where people live who like Asian food, for example, which I'll show you that in a second. So
Can I ask one more follow-up question to what James just asked on the predictability end?
Yeah, please do.
Great. So does the software platform have any way of kind of, I assume not, then kind of predicting market demand and how well saturated an area might be with supermarkets or with restaurants or with a certain kind of retail store to see if there's potentially a demand for additional types of those stores, or does it not go to that? Or is it really only based on existing foot traffic?
We do have that. No, we can do it at more of a macro level is what I'll call it. This is actually a brand new report we just came out with. So it's called supply and demand for a trade area. So what this is showing in this example is showing clothing stores in the greater San Francisco area. But to answer that, I mean, to show answer your question, essentially, this will give you basically where the supply and demand is high or low. So if we wanted to look at the region, a city, whatever it might be, and sort it by grocery or whatever type you wanted to do, you can see, okay, what areas are currently well served by that type of retail versus which areas could use that type of retail. And then we have a tool called void analysis that gets more into offering up specific retailers that could be a good fit for that to address that. So which is more at that micro level. But yeah, we just came out with this report here, which I think does a great job at highlighting where certain types of retail could go, essentially.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. All right, if there's no other questions, trade area gets more into the demographic data, the psychographic data, all those types of things that I've referenced so far. So looking at first at our trade area, basically what this is showing is where people have come from who have shopped at the Ridge at some point over the last 5.5 years. So this map is generated based off the visitor's home location who visited at least one time over this time frame. So you can see here, as we zoom out, even where people have come from who have shopped at the Ridge. You can even play around with minimum visit frequency. So if we wanted to instead look at people who have visited the Ridge at least 20 times over this time frame, we'll see that map shrink down quite a bit, and that's more of our core audience of visitors there. Excuse me. But from there, we can start overlaying other data. If I don't get unexpected errors, let's try that again. But we can start overlaying other data sets on top of that. So I forget the name of the person who asked the question of where we get the demographic data, but we get it from this, what we call it our marketplace, which are a bunch of third-party data sets that we, Placer, subscribes to as a company, and then passes that subscription on to you, our customer. So there's all different types of data in here, from demographics, workplace data, crime data, weather data, neighborhood grades, which gets more into quality of life indexes. So all different types of data sets that we ultimately have that you can start looking for your trade area here. So there's ultimately a number of different ways we can define a trade area within the Placer platform. We can do the old school ring radius, which is drawing just a 5-mile ring around somewhere and giving you demographic data and all that for everything inside that ring. We also have drive time in here. So if we wanted to evaluate anyone within a 30-minute drive, there we go. Or we can base your trade area on actual visitation to a location like the Ridge, where everything you see highlighted in pink now is the smallest area on a map, at least within 50 miles, where we could draw in the top 70% of the traffic that visited the Ridge. So we're basically counting those who visited, leaving out those who didn't. So once we have these various shapes drawn here, whether we want to look at actual visitation, just 5 miles, 30-minute drive, we can then start looking at things like the demographic data that we have in here. So I like this PopStats data set because it's very similar to census, but it's kept a bit more up to date. So we can see not only who lives within 5 miles, the 30-minute drive within those pink highlighted areas, but what type of demographics do they have? And not only what type of demographics, but also do we have more or less of this demographic group versus the rest of the country, or you can do it for the state as well. But if you see any of these numbers right here that are over 100 or under 100 for that matter, that means you're either over or under indexed in a certain demographic group. So if we just consider the 5 miles immediately around the ridge there, we see we have quite an older population. We over index everywhere from the age of 40 all the way up to 85 plus. So definitely an older population who lives within that 5 miles. But the reason why I really love the way that we look at data is that if we base it on who actually comes to visit the ridge, we actually see we draw in quite a bit of a younger audience too, age 18 to 21, who live in these pink highlighted areas. You all know the area much better than I do, so it probably makes sense that we would see some younger people living in those areas who are coming to visit. So that's why I really love this, because a lot of developers or people in real estate you might work with might just look at a 5 mile ring and look at that and say, wow, there's just a lot of the older population here, and might not put something that's more geared towards, let's say, people in their 20s or 30s, because they're just looking at a simple ring, where you can tell much more of a clear story about who's coming to a place based on what we're showing here based on true visitation. So there's not just demographic data in here. I'm not going to go through all these because there's a ton, but we have things like workplace data, which gets more into what type of businesses do we have in the area, what type of employees. So if we're doing more things like industrial manufacturing type development, we can see, okay, do we have the type of employees here that can ultimately staff whatever type of development we're doing. So we have all of that workplace data in here, information on how people spend their money, what they like to do, or what type of things do they like. So getting back to that point you made, James, if we wanted to see what type of food and beverage do people like in this area, here we go. So I mean, a ton of data in here. This part of the platform alone we can sink almost our entire time in. But any questions before I show you guys just a couple last things to wrap up here?
Yeah, I've seen you sort of going down the left toolbar. I think we have a few people who would be interested in what I guess would be in the area analysis. Yeah, I was wondering if you could run reports on, you know, a drawn shape for a downtown, or if we have our own GIS of like, here's a zoning district, if that's something that we could upload and overlay. You know, there are some other questions about, you know, what does that data look like sort of in the aggregate, for how you would look at things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to looking at an area like a downtown location, then in that case, we have a couple of different ways we can go. You can either send us, to your point, James, if you already have somebody who's using a GIS type platform and they have shape files that can easily be sent over to us, we can get those uploaded and created and get those points of interest in here very easily. You also have the ability to create your own points of interest, which really takes just a matter of minutes, where you go in here and if you say, I want to look at this area in Rochester, you draw your geofence around it, you name it, save it, and it reports up like that. It takes literally minutes. So you have a couple of different options. You can either, work with our team here and get whatever points of interest you want uploaded in here, or you have the ability to create them yourself. So
do the like data outputs for that basically look like what we were just looking at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would look exactly like every other report. Yep. Okay.
And can you use that point of interest? Like, are they interactive at all? Like if you're looking at that point of interest, can you look at, you know, people who come into that from 30-minute drive time? You know, you can set all of those sort of boundaries and parameters for that broader area, not just a single site within it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Jen,
Yep.
Darren, does that cover what you were looking for? Do you have other things you want to ask?
Yeah, I got a bunch of questions. I just want to wait till he's done.
Yeah, yeah, I was kind of just looking to see a little bit more of like what the data analytics look like there.
The
As we were
data
going.
analytics look like where? I'm sorry, Jen?
In the downtown areas.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I can, I don't know if I'll have time to, especially if we have questions to get all that, but I'm happy to, if you want to send me anywhere that you'd like to see a report on, I'm happy to run that for you. But yeah, to show you guys area analysis really quick, that all this data is pretty self-explanatory in this part. Vehicle traffic volume. So if you're ever working with anybody who wants vehicle traffic, yeah, you no longer have to put out the little strips or anything like that anymore. You can just log in here and get by time of day, day of week, how many people are driving by a location. Plan development. You're usually fairly familiar with what's happening in your own neck of the woods, but this feature right here is used more commonly to look at other areas throughout either, in your case, the greater Northeast or New Hampshire, whatever it might be, where you can see what type of development from retail, residential, office, industrial, manufacturing, all that is happening in the area. So you can look at either what's happening in your own neck of the woods, or again, look at other places to see what type of development's going on there.
How is
And then-
that data gathered?
We
things
use
that
a
are-
third-party source for that, called BCI Build Central is the name of the source that we use for that.
Okay.
Clayton, if I have a downtown client and I want to compare the traffic in one location versus another, is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And a very common use case, Warren, for sure, is looking at, your own downtown versus others, for sure.
No, I'm saying a location within downtown, one location versus a competitor.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I mean, you can add up to 8 different points of interest in a single report like this. So you can, compare up to 8 places at one time. So. Great. And then crime data, pretty self-explanatory. Shows you what type of crimes happening in the area. But a couple last things to show you all here, and then I'll take any questions y'all have. Favorite places shows you where else people are going other than the place we're evaluating. So in this case, we're excuse me, looking at the ridge and seeing, okay, where else are people going? How this reads here is 42% of the people who have visited the ridge over the last year have also been to the crossings in Newington, or they've been to Rochester Crossing, Fox Run Mall, so on and so forth. You can sort that by various categories. So if we just wanted to look to see where do visitors here go grocery shopping, there we go. Visitor journey. In this case, is giving you before and after, where people are before or after they come to, in this case, the ridge. So we can see here prior to coming to the ridge, if the person didn't leave from home or from work, where did they leave from most commonly? So Kohl's, Lowe's, Hannaford. Then they came and spent some time at the ridge. And then this is where they ultimately went afterwards. About the same locations there. But we have not only the top handful of locations there, we will have the top hundreds of prior and post locations in here of where people are going before or after they come to a location. We also have favorite chain information, which will show where in general do people who go to the ridge also shop. So without too big of a surprise, Walmart's the most popular chain for people who visit the ridge. There's one there, so it makes sense. 81% of the people who've been to the ridge have also been to a Walmart. That could be any Walmart nationwide over the last year. Again, we can sort that out by various categories. So if we're doing grocery development, we could see, okay, where do people who visit the ridge prefer to go grocery shopping? Favorite places takes that more down to a micro level, where this will show you basically the exact locations where they were. So when I was showing you the top 5 earlier, we can show much more than that, break it down by different categories as well. So if we want to see what dining places are the most popular for people to go to the Ridge, here we go. We also have favorite routes. So this will show you which roads people took most commonly to either get to the Ridge or after they left. Hourly visits, pretty self-explanatory, showing you when people are there by hour or by day. Or length of stay. Once somebody comes and stays, how long do they stay on average? Just under an hour. I already showed you all one Placer Extra report, the one that was showing the trade area supply and demand. Again, one of my favorites that we have here. But we have a number of other great reports in here that we see our customers utilize. All these are available upon request at any given time. They're not able to be created natively within the UI, but you do have the ability to request these whenever you want. So some of the more popular ones that we see utilized are things like this site selection by similarity. So if we're working with a particular retailer, or this even works for office, manufacturing, industrial as well. But if we're trying to figure out which site might be best for somebody to locate within a region, this is just an example I pulled up. But we can basically show, okay, based on the sampling of locations that you gave us that you wanted to find similar locations to, we will then rank basically the similarity of other various sites within the area, as you can see here. So again, this works very well for retail, but again, also for other types of economic development. These site selection similarity scores are used very often. We have,
So if for that one,
Yeah.
you know, say a clothing retailer comes in, the inputs that they would need to give you are, you know, here are other clothing retailers that are doing pretty well that we would want a site where we would do really well.
yeah, either it can either be competitive locations that they want to find similar locations to, or their own. You just provide us with up to 10 of of your locations that you want a similarity analysis for, where you want to see visually for that. And yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
cool.
Yeah, I mean, for if there's anybody within the organization more interested in the tourism side of it, we do have Trip Orchard by Market, which will give you who comes to visit your region, where do they come from, where do they stay, what do they do while they're there, all those various things in that single report there. We have things like retail leakage for residents. So if we wanted to analyze what do our residents do for either grocery shopping or to buy a car, to get furniture, whatever it might be. This report will start breaking that down, showing you, okay, where do our residents go for these various things? Do we see leakage to other areas? So again, a number of different reports in here. One of the key resources we will provide you as a customer is what's called a customer success manager. They are a data scientist that is dedicated to your account, where they will work with you all, anybody who wants access to the platform, not only to help train you and how to utilize this thing, make sure all of your important points of interest are created, to your point earlier, James, but then to also sit down with you however often you want and say, what is it that you all are working on right now, and how can we best apply our data to help achieve what you're trying to do? So if you talk to us and say, hey, we're really trying to get a new grocer in town, or whatever it might be, we'll help you build the case and help apply our data to it, because we understand there's a lot of data in here. It can be hard to dissect it at times, so we do really put a lot of effort into our support side as well. So but yeah, with that being said, that was the crash course into Placer here, guys. So more than happy to take any questions you all have now at this point.
Yeah, I think Jen and I have a similar one to start off with, and then maybe we can branch out. Could you talk a little bit about how your pricing would be determined? Because we're looking at this as potentially being a joint purchase between multiple organizations. So would you set that like by number of logins that people would be able to have, or by certain geographies we have, or is there a limited amount of information or number of reports that we would run periodically? How would you set that up?
Yeah, to address that last point, just because it's easy, the other part's much more complex. In terms of access to it, once we sign whichever organizations we end up signing up here, it's unlimited access across the organizations from there. So you get anyone who wants to log in, who's a employee of the organizations would be able to get a login. You these as you want to all day long. So it's unlimited access. In terms of who we grant access to or how we work with multiple organizations, that's really is just a conversation where typically whoever is leading the charge on your end, I'll usually get you in touch with my director. Because if we're just working with one single organization, that's easy. It's easy to price, easy to work around that. But if we're bringing in, let's say 2 to 3, 4 organizations who are all wanting a piece of the action and to gain access to it, we will then just have to determine, who else getting access, what's the workload looking like, and then we'll give you a price based on that. But that I wouldn't have a price right now, not knowing who all you're looking to involved in this, but typically how we price it out, or what the barometer or parameters I should say that we use to price this out, is based on population of an area. That's usually the fairest way we find to price this, and right size it high or low. So that's usually the parameters that we're using to find a price.
I know we have Noah's on. We have a couple people from NHBEA on the call today. But if we were looking at doing this regionally, I think right now we're still early in the conversation, but it would probably be one of the regional organizations like SRPC being the sort of central procurement person. All of the other towns or cities who would be wanting direct access and potentially sharing costs would generally fall within our geography.
Okay. Which is good. And then typically, I mean, what we would do there is, if SRPC wants to basically hold the contract, so to speak, and own the procurement process, then typically what we would then do is add those additional groups on, whether it be a city or whatever it might be, as what we call an acting agent, where we grant them access to the platform. But yeah, there's usually a charge up from there. So if let's say just for easy math that we're charging SRPC $10,000 for the solution, then we would say for any additional add-ons from there, it would be $5,000 a piece or whatever it might be. So that's usually how we do.
So a base price on the geography, and then an additional charge for every formal, this organization gets direct access.
Right. Otherwise, you can certainly work as basically a data intermediary between, which then you're usually running a lot of reports for other people, where you can feed information to your other partner organizations as much as you'd like. But in order for them to gain access, we would need to add them onto the contract as like I said, an acting agent.
And Clayton, as a follow-up question to that, and forgive me if I missed this, does the unlimited access for users that are on it, does that include unlimited requests of Placer Extra? Is there a certain number of requests for Placer Extra reports?
So you will have an allotment of credits, so to speak. So these don't cost extra. You're given credits within the subscription. What we have found, or basically how the math works out, is you can run basically 1 report per day and still have credits left over. So we usually don't find people running reports quite that often. That's quite a bit of these extra reports. So we try to give you more than enough to cover you for the year.
Great.
When you say 1 report per day, do you mean 1 report per day for the entire organization, or 1 report per day for every subset of the contract? In other words, if SRPC does the contract, who likely would in this case, and there's 10 towns, and there probably will be, that'd like to be a part of it, does that mean 10 reports a day, or does that mean 1 report a day?
It would be one report per day, like 360 some reports for the year. Yeah. That's what it about equates to. So yeah, it wouldn't, I'm not talking about per entity who's signing up. Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly flat rate in terms of the number of credits we offer. You are able to buy more post sale if you feel like you're going to be running out. To be honest, we don't really have people run out often. It seems like something you might run out of, but it doesn't really happen hardly at all. So.
And the other question I had was, obviously, been looking at your company, obviously, the numbers look good. It looks like people are really satisfied with the service. You're 1 out of every 10. Are there companies that have more?
More panel members, you mean?
Yeah, more cell phones out there that data could be better or as good. We're going to get asked this because every one of us would have to go to our boards. This isn't just like a company. We have to go and say, we're a town, it's public money. We have to say, we want Placer.ai versus blah, blah, blah. And this is why we want them specifically.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, trust me. I only sell to individuals like yourself. So I understand. And yeah, in terms of panel size, I can't speak for others. Honestly, the one thing I do know about us versus really any competition is that we are the only company, at least that I'm aware of, that sources all of our data ourselves. Where we own our partnerships with these data providers, we source all the data ourselves, where versus other companies that you might talk to, I'm not sure what they'll tout as a panel size, honestly. 10% of the population is more than enough, quite frankly, for us to do what we do. It's way beyond the measure of what's called statistical significance. So in terms of panel size, I can't say that, but a lot of other companies you'll see out there, what we call buy their data from data brokers, where they're third-party companies where they purchase their data, incorporate it into their platform. That not only causes delays in reporting, but also you can't really control the accuracy or really the size of the panel when you're buying through brokers. So yeah, that's really one of the benefits of working with us, is that we own our algorithm, we own our panel, we own everything about the platform, which is good. So
that's good. That definitely answers my question, and we'll certainly put my board at ease. The other question I had was about training. You had mentioned earlier that you sort of assign somebody to the contract, and whatever we need, we can ask and we can customize it, et cetera. Is that true for all subsets as well? In other words, if James is the lead, is that true for subsets? We can all get training and ask.
Yep.
Good. Thanks. That's it.
So I do want to be cognizant of time. It's 10 o'clock. I can stick around and keep the call open. Clayton, do you have a few minutes, or do you need to hop off?
Yeah, my next call is now for an hour, so I do have time to stay on.
Okay, so yeah, I understand if people need to drop out. Any other questions while we're here? Robin? That was a no. Okay. Anybody else? Joe?
Just thank you. Appreciate the presentation.
Yeah, thank you,
James,
Jeff.
this is Tori. I had a quick request that I put in the chat, and there may not be time to get to it, but my concern, Clayton, if you could speak to it's really exciting to see the layering capacity in the maps piece, especially with the data coming from so many different sources. How do you see Placer's role in making sure or protecting against the use of this as a tool to drive inequality? I'm concerned about end user data literacy and folks going, this gives us the ability to make sure we're only getting the types of users we want to get, which could really set back a lot of planning work around equity, especially in food deserts, especially around healthcare access, where we're able to say, we don't want those types of users. we don't want those types of clients, here's a tool for us to use in our decision analysis to be able to make choices about our business moving forward that really could contribute to some significant inequity. And I'm in population health, which is very different from economic planning, but really the conversations I think need to be had in kind of broadly and together. So is there anything you can share about how this tool has addressed the risk of bias?
Yeah, I mean, are you, and Tori, I want to make sure I'm clear in what you're asking me. I think it's a great question. It's really making me think, and I've honestly never had this question before in my year plus here. So it's really a fantastic question. But when you say inequality, are you talking about in our panel in terms of who, like that 10% that we keep referencing? Is that what you're addressing, or are you?
So yeah,
I want to make sure I'm clear in what you're asking.
I'm asking about that because that was, you talk about kind of having a demographic signature of that panel based on the data that's available from multiple different data sources. So, and I know there's no way to cover this in the short time we've allotted, but how representative of the population is that panel, and
Okay.
how do we use, there's a real risk of saying, we know that these users that use these stores tend to be lower socioeconomic status or lower education status, or they tend to be from this area. How do we manage to make sure that folks are using that information for good and not evil? And I define good as being committed to creating equal opportunity and access to healthcare, food, and services for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I'll actually use my experience talking to actually my hometown, which is Peoria, Illinois. That's where I'm based right now, as well. And they're currently looking into Placer for looking into food deserts. That's a huge problem in my town. Are food deserts where there's huge portions of the city that are not served at all by grocery. So Peoria is planning on utilizing our data to basically they're going to be mapping out, drawing geofences around those neighborhoods that are considered food deserts to analyze what do these individuals do in these areas. Where do they go buy groceries? Where do they go for healthcare? Things like that. So that's absolutely something that our data is used for often is to try to help these underserved areas and in getting more access to just the basic quality of life things that they need, right? And in terms of our panel, that's something that is very carefully been crafted in terms of trying to get a very representative sample of the U.S. population. We have a panel of about 32 million, but we could at a flip of a switch basically turn that panel into 60 million actually if we wanted to. The reason why we don't is if we did, it could really throw the balance of to the exact point you made, Tori. It could throw the balance of our panel off where we are more heavily focused maybe on a certain demographic, income level, whatever it might be that I mean, we're not right now because that's why we so carefully select who our panel members are and making sure that every census block in the country is covered. Because it's very important to make sure that it's not biased one way or another. So hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
See, I was just looking at the chat as well. I'm not sure if Charlie's still on, but he asked, is retail leakage based on spending behaviors of people living in the area, or is it all retail sales? How we identify leakage, if Charlie is still on, but just for the rest of everybody here, is not based on where people are spending their money, but more spending their time, so to speak, with foot traffic. So excuse me, we don't collect any credit card information or anything that tells us how people are spending their money in various retail locations. But what we can tell is that they left your city, went to another city, and went to a car dealership, went to the furniture store, whatever it might be. So that's how we ultimately identify leakages, where people go versus, I mean, we can't tell you with 100% certainty that they went to that car dealership and then spent money there, or to the furniture store, whatever it might be, but we can tell you that they went there. So that's how we identify it, more than how they're spending their money. So.
Okay. We are recording this call, so Charlie or whoever else jumped off will be able to go back and check your questions and things. One that I sort of have, as somebody who works on a lot of regional plans and a lot less of the direct site selection with people, is, can we use this, one, to sort of follow up original sources for things that aren't your data? So if you have like that external census report, is it usually relatively easy to sort of follow that back so we can get the original census stuff as well? And two, are there any sort of proprietary concerns or issues about us publishing information that we get out of this platform in, say, a regional plan, citing, here's traffic count data, here is economic information related to our region's downtowns or the region as a whole, or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. So to answer your first question, I mean, yeah, pretty simple. Yes, in terms of, the demographic and census data, but in terms of citing our data, you'll find whenever you finally see a contract from us, the one thing that we ask, and this is a sample report that Aberdeen, South Dakota did. The only thing that we ask is that you cite the data. Or your source. I mean, pretty 101, I guess, in that case. But that's really all we ask of you, is that because we want you sharing our data. That's how a lot of people ultimately come to look at Placer, is that they see a report that Aberdeen put and that they source Placer as their source for this, and then they're like, oh, we'd love to get our hands on some of this data too. So yeah, that's all we ask, is that you cite it. So.
Okay. Any other questions?
The only thing I do is I like to stay on after Clayton's off and just sort of discuss it, see what we all think, if anyone wants to stay on.
Yeah, I think I could give it 5 minutes or so, but I think with people who have also jumped off, we'll definitely want to return to that conversation on a future call as well.
Works
and
for
not
me.
make any conclusions here.
Works for me.
Any other questions for Clayton? All right, I'm not seeing any. So thank you so much for your time. We've got your email and we'll pass things along if we need them. Just to sort of let you know where we are in this process, we're pretty early stage. We had a few people who saw your presentations, were very interested, but we haven't figured out the details of exactly who would be part of the partnership, how many people, that sort of thing. We haven't officially decided on who would be the lead person doing procurement. And I would assume that once we do, their procurement rules are probably going to kick in terms of whether we just need to get 3 competitive quotes or whether we have to go for a full RFP process or things like that. So we'll definitely keep you posted on where we are with those things. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help that conversation.
Right. Sounds good. Thanks, Clayton.
Thank you, Clayton.
Thank you, Clayton.